A lot of the changes, if it's a digital transformation or sustainability, requires sometimes breaking down the existing systems, processes, and structures. And that also is a Herculean task.
Naithy Cyriac, welcome to HSB and the Into the Futures podcast.
Thank you so much, Gregory. Really appreciate being here as well. Thank you.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
Yeah.
And wonderful to have you share your insights and leadership and career with our students. And you're currently living in Singapore, so we were both there for a time. Our own paths crisscrossed somewhat.
Yeah.
So I was there at the National University of Singapore for my PhD, you for your MBA.
Yeah.
And you've had a fascinating and I think very rich career following that. We also share one of the same mentors that we worked with. So Sun Yat-sen, one of the greats from McKinsey, and now a major leadership professional and author and coach.
Yeah.
So wonderful person to have as someone to look up to, as an inspiration.
Yeah.
So can you share your journey with us? So how you started off, how you got into first consulting, and what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for that warm introduction. Really appreciate it, and the warm welcome. So for me, I was born in India, brought up in India. I worked 4 years in financial research in India, and then decided, of course, to go do my MBA in NUS. And after that, I think since then, the paths that I've taken have been a bit unconventional, from moving to Myanmar to start an office for an Asian consulting firm. So it was a very entrepreneurial challenge that I embraced right after my MBA. And was very grateful for, because that definitely helped me step out of my comfort zone, accelerate my learning, and also expand my networks beyond my existing networks, let's say in India and Singapore. From then on, I went on to cover over 20 plus countries, consult and advise clients across 25 plus sectors across Asia Pacific and the Middle East. And it's been definitely a transformational journey. I was also, because of my location being in Myanmar, I was responsible for piloting the public sector consulting within my consulting firm. And since then, I think also, allowed me to get out of my comfort zone, become a partner eventually, to then last year deciding to set up my own company and focus more in the organizational transformation, leadership, impact and public policy space. So this has definitely been quite exciting, and I'm grateful also to be able to come here and give back and spend some time with the students, which has been definitely very wonderful.
That's a wonderful and fascinating journey that you've had so far, and I'm sure it will only continue to get better as you venture off and you open your own own initiatives. Oh, I'm sure it will. And also very exciting for us to have you here and sharing your insights with our students. As you and I have talked about, often, I think students from anywhere can get a bit of a parochial mindset. So they get sort of used to the status quo, to convention, to how things have been done before. And of course, in this day and age, the world is changing very rapidly. You have to be prepared for a completely new world tomorrow. What are some of the challenges you feel face current students in terms of adapting both to technology and then also this fear of maybe doing something different and trying something unique as you did for your own career?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, if I had thought that was difficult when I started out, I think it's even more difficult now with the geopolitical, macroeconomic shifts that you have mentioned. But I think this also definitely puts the focus back on the basics, right? So I think with AI becoming so widespread and so widely applicable. The more manual jobs or more data entry and analysis level jobs would definitely be automated and disrupted. And this is where the focus comes back to us as professionals, as executives, and what is our unique value add in terms of the influence that we have across in the industries we work in the companies we work in, or with the teams we work in. As well as when it comes to pushing the innovation in our ability to be able to think outside of the box, be able to predict the future and stay abreast of the future is really what is more important. So that human aspects that make us human in terms of being able to think ahead and be able to influence others becomes even more important.
Absolutely. What are some of the things you've been working on with our HSB students?
Definitely. So it's all been, again, about going back to the basics. So the students are definitely very brilliant, have had brilliant careers and experiences that have shaped their journey till the day they have now been accepted as students at HSB. And the idea was really to be able to channel that into enhancing their effectiveness as leaders. So we had a packed 2 days. It was quite an interesting 2 days where I really got to work very closely with the students and get to know them on a personal level. So day one, the first half, we focused on the consultant mindset, right? So you may do a lot of cases, you may do a lot of problems in theory. However, what we need to go back to is the basics in terms of how we structure problems, how we ask the right questions as well. So a bulk of our initial day one workshop focused on that. As Henry Ford said, that if he asked people what they would like, they would have said faster horses. So sometimes the questions you get from clients, from your employers, your bosses, your team members may not be the right questions. So knowing what is the right questions to ask, how to get to the root causes, and what is the right problems we want to solve is half the battle. So we focused a lot on that, as well as how to structure possible solutions. What are the frameworks that we can use to be able to make sense of the data, of the different, sometimes ambiguous, viewpoints and perceptions that we have. On day one, in the second half, we focus more on the leadership mindset. So going really back to the person and what makes a leader, and with the idea being that everyone is a leader. So we started with actually everyone sharing about leadership traits of the other person. It's very difficult sometimes to talk about ourselves. So the exercise we used was to have people talk about each other, to acknowledge and affirm the leader in them. And then we went on to do a lot of group exercises and peer exercises that help them embody the leader within them, get outside of their comfort zone, be more confident through action, right? So I think it was an intense but a lot of a fun-filled, fulfilling day.
Oh, wonderful. And what are some of the traits you feel that the leaders of today need? Do you feel that leadership is something that is timeless, and it's something that we can look back, 2,500 years ago and adapt those same principles? Or are there certain elements that are maybe changing about leadership and new things that leaders may need in today's world?
That's a great question. I think I would say there have been changes, especially when we look at the amount of ambiguity that we need to deal with and be able to manage and cut through the noise sometimes. So that definitely requires an ability to be able to perceive different possibilities, different angles, different viewpoints. People are definitely getting more opinionated. We have a lot more data on both sides that we can access online. So being able to cut through that noise and ambiguity and that uncertainty is very important. And there are two ways to do it. Either you are authoritative or you focus too much on consensus building. And the answer sometimes lies in having a balanced approach, being able to lead a team while also being able to get inputs and being humble enough to listen to others as well. So it's I think it's definitely evolving, especially as we look at the future of work. How is the relationship between an employer and an employee changing as well, and people are working remotely. How does managing people in these remote environments work? So we are definitely seeing a lot more newer challenges evolving with the evolving future of work as well. And so the most important quality in a leader is to stay adaptable and be agile and be open-minded as well.
Oh, wonderful. And ambiguity, as you mentioned, is something that is a serious concern for all of us. It seems that new disruptive technologies and advances are coming about every day and can radically affect the way that the economy works and the way that the world of work is structured. What do you feel are some strategies for leaders to kind of surf those tsunamis of change and be able to adapt themselves and their organizations for the world of tomorrow?
I think the first step is accepting that there are changes happening. Change is real, and we need to change to adapt to the change that's happening around us. And I think that is a key challenge when people sometimes are in denial of some of the changes that are happening. So the first very important thing is accepting that change is happening around us. Second important thing is being open, being curious, to understand more about the changes before you dismiss them or before you undermine the impact these changes may have. What we have seen, some examples of is, for example, being able to find small use cases in a safe environment where you can try and apply new technologies, look at the impact, assess if it helps or not, and be able to then scale it, right? So finding such use cases in a small, safe environment that works, that allows you to test out and anticipate any challenges or issues that come up is a good way to staying abreast and being able to experiment and try and understand some of the new technologies that are coming out on a day-to-day basis, right? From ChatGPT to now DeepSeek. There's way more kind of LLM language models as well that are coming up as well. So I think accepting it, being curious enough, finding use cases that allow you to apply it in a small, safe environment and scale are some of the key steps. And then the second point is getting consensus. That is usually the biggest challenge of any leader who wants to try something new. We've seen this and probably are still seeing this in the area of sustainability as well. Consensus building, getting the buy-in internally of different stakeholders or externally of consumers or your customers is tough as well. So I think first being able to accept, find use cases, apply, and then also getting buy-in from the stakeholders to scale it up if it does work, and I think adapt and adopt in the day-to-day environment is important.
So in your line of work, when you're talking to executives, when you're counseling CEOs or founders, what are some of their fears that you find in the way that they lead or about the world in general, about the ability of their organizations to adapt, and how do you help them through those challenges?
I think the biggest fear is once that acceptance is there, that yes, there are changes happening, that also mean acceptance of our organization is probably not equipped to adapt or be able to accommodate that change. And that leads to a mindset of being able to revisit what you have spent years building up, right? Which is not easy. And I think that's usually where we face the first hurdle in being able to adapt something that we've spent years building up to be able to face what's coming and be prepared for what's coming. So this is where finding those small use cases or that safe environments where you're able to apply in one department before you scale out in others is important. Other issues or challenges that we've come across is also a lot of the changes, if it's a digital transformation or sustainability or anything else, a 4IR requires sometimes breaking down the existing systems, processes and structures. And that also is a Herculean task. And this is where having the right stakeholders involved is absolutely crucial to get any headway. And it can be still done in an incremental process. What is important is that you have the buy-in, you have the right people on it to drive it, and you have the right intentions as well. So I think these three are usually the biggest ingredients in ensuring a successful transformation. And I think being empathetic is also important, that it is not easy for anyone who's at the receiving end of that change as well. It may mean questioning your current roles and being able to reimagine your current roles in a future that is completely different in 10, 15 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. It can be very challenging for founders, for people who have fallen in love with their creation, to realize that suddenly the world has changed and it's no longer viable in the same way. So often they can pivot, they can become even stronger than they were before. But plenty of companies fail because they're unable to deal with that creative destruction and adapting for what's next. So what are some of the things that you're personally optimistic or fearful about in terms of current changes and, as you mentioned, these large language models, the radical changes that AI and other technologies are ushering in?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about our ability to reinvent. Because I feel, especially with COVID, we saw a lot of forced transformations that happened, but that has also accelerated in recent years since because of the foundations that were set. So we are seeing companies becoming a lot more nimble, being more open. It is a slow-moving process, but it's definitely happening. So I think that's something to be optimistic about. Another thing is we're seeing a lot of emphasis, especially post-COVID, on upskilling, reskilling, job pivots. So I think there is more openness in people about how the jobs would look like in the future, and a sense of urgency to be able to adapt to that. How that will happen is, of course, a different story. But at least that openness is there, and I think that's definitely something to be optimistic about. What I'm fearful of maybe is a lot of these language models, for example, may tend to be biased based on what is fed to them as well. And this is where leaders as role models are an important ingredient to help align what the AI or new technologies are bringing versus the best practices that we know formed through intense experiences across many years, right? In terms of understanding what is right and what is wrong. And I think being able to differentiate the two is easier said than done, and hence will take a lot more trial and error to balance and get it right as well.
Oh, absolutely. So there are many challenges ahead, many wonderful opportunities and possibilities. But yes, as you mentioned, many things that require serious and deep reflection and consideration. So the name of our podcast, Into the Futures, implies that there are multiple possible futures, and that we're able to enact and create and hopefully aim towards one that we prefer. So in a world of constant change, what advice would you give to students who are going out into the world and they're trying to aim somewhere? You need to aim in order to have some kind of orientation in the world. But in a world that's constantly changing, what advice would you have for them in order to craft their career in a meaningful direction?
Having spent 2 days with the students, I think the one thing I have observed is the students are very purpose-driven. They're very driven by a vision to make an impact, on society, in the world. We've been discussing a lot of new business ideas as well, which has been exciting. And I think the one advice I have is to, follow that spark, right? So to not let that spark die down, because, being in a market like India, there's a lot of different opportunities. And it is easy to go back to the tried and tested ways and the safe alternative careers and pathways. However, with the amount of brilliance that I have witnessed in these 2 days, I do believe, this generation is definitely a generation of change makers. And I do believe that they have the capability, and all they need is the conviction to follow that capability and the vision that they have.
Oh, wonderful. So for leaders, what advice would you have for them as they mentor students, as they mentor young people, and prepare them to take up the mantle of leadership in this changing world?
Yeah, definitely. I think leaders who have especially, walked the path before, have overcome similar challenges, have a lot that they can give back to the students in terms of sharing their learnings, sharing, what helped them overcome the challenges that they faced and that the students are likely to face as well. Being there to maybe pave the way for them through, potential opportunities that they can pursue based on the skills and capabilities that they have is crucial, because these are capable students and all they need are the right opportunities that allow them to shine.
Wonderful. Naithy Cyriac, thank you so much for joining us on Into the Futures today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, comment, or share. We look forward to welcoming you back in the futures.